The 6th Astra Militarum character has joined Tacticus as Marshal Dreir. The Lord Marshal becomes the 98th character overall to join the game. Today, we'll see if this little horsey will be clip-clopping their way into your team.
So this is a little bit of a surprise release for us all, as another Astra Militarum character joins the game, and that probably wasn't on our bingo cards for September. But as part of the next Battle Pass, we will be getting a rather interested mounted character, Lord Marshal Dreir, and his trusty steed, ES-819, which is a rather amusing name for a horse. In lore, Lord Marshal Dreir is one of the most respected living commanders in the Astra Militarum and a living legend among the Death Corps of Krieg. The planet Krieg is interesting in itself, as it was once a rebellious hive world, with its ruling elite turning traitor during the Age of Apostasy, which was about 1,000 years after the Horus Heresy. But one man, Colonel Jurton, refused to bend the knee and unleashed atomic devastation on his own planet, reducing Krieg to a radioactive wasteland rather than seeing it fall into heresy. For 500 years after that, civil war raged in the poisoned ruins. The descendants of those who survived grew up in bunkers, breathing ash, drinking rad filtration sludge, and learning that duty to the Emperor is more sacred than life itself. From this hellscape rose the Death Corps, soldiers bred for war, conditioned for obedience and perfected in pain, and Dreir epitomizes everything that defines Krieg: unwavering duty, disregard for personal cost, and a stoic commitment to the Emperor's will. But unlike some of the more callous generals of the Imperium, Dreir's renown doesn't stem from bombarding cities into oblivion or throwing his men's lives into lost situations. Although he is still utterly merciless when the war demands it, his renown instead comes from leading from the front, enduring the same hellish conditions as his men, and fighting in the thick of it with terrifying efficiency. Before becoming a Lord Marshal, Dreir was once just another nameless soldier in the 143rd Krieg Infantry Regiment, trained for death just like the rest. He rose to command, not through favoritism or politics, but through relentless competence, iron resolve, and an unshakable belief in duty. And one of the most unique aspects of Dreir's legend is his bond with his war mount, ES-819, a Death Rider steed. An ES-819 is no ordinary horse. It is a terrifyingly resilient beast that has been repaired and repatched so many times it barely resembles a living animal. The two have served together through countless battles, and when Dreir rose through the ranks, he refused to abandon his old companion, and the two have been charging enemy lines together ever since. The mount has survived what should be fatal injuries, shrapnel wounds, broken bones, and even an instance where it reportedly stopped breathing. Yet every time it returns to Dreir's side, stitched up, drugged, and ready to go again. Some troopers claim it's the Emperor's blessing that keeps the beast alive, and others joke that the horse is held together by sheer Krieg stubbornness and enough stimulants to floor a full-on demon. Together, Dreir and ES-819 are an incredible pair, and I think they really deserve our respect and love as characters joining Tacticus. And as we'll see, I think they'll really become a character we'll see in a lot of different teams. We can unlock Marshal Dreir from the next Battle Pass. You'll need to buy at least the Premium Pass. In the Battle Pass there are 5 extra levels because he's an epic character, so we're going to need a little bit of extra shards just to open him. And then you can top up his character shards and upgrades from the new Purge Order event that runs from October the 5th to October the 11th. And in the meantime, if you want to earn some free blackstone to help you on your way, you can use my Refer a Friend code in-game today to get 100 free blackstone. Just note that you can only use one person's Refer a Friend code, so make sure you make the most of it. And as a community, we've unlocked another major milestone for the channel, because we've blown past 8,000 subscribers on the back of the last patch review video, which means we have a new code, and this one, DBP8K, will give us some Astra Militarum goodies as we get Castellan Creed shards and extra coins to push you through the Battle Pass for Dreir. Remember, every 1,000 subs we're going to get a new code, and we have some really big targets to hit this year, as I want to see us nailing 10,000 subs before Christmas, so get your guildmates to subscribe, and I'll keep trying to deliver the most cinematic Tacticus videos for you all. Now we'll go straight into his traits. Marshal Dreir is an Imperial character. He has a Power 3 melee attack, which has a 40% pierce ratio, and he has no ranged attack. He has no official relic yet, although it will be fitting into his weapon slot when it arrives. He has the Resilient trait, which stops him dying the first time he's reduced to 0 health, unless he's been overkilled. And he is unstoppable, which means he doesn't have to stop moving when he goes through fire, ice, or barbed wire, and with a 4 movement speed, That means he can really get around the battlefield. Next, we'll look at the character's melee damage, range damage, and defense. We do this by leveling the character up to be Winged Diamond 3 with level 30 skills and no weapons or equipment. This is just to equalize the playing field. Then, Castellan Creed, the character with the most average armor and traits in the game, becomes a punching bag for them to test their damage. And finally, Creed will punch them back to see their defensive skills. This is all then ranked against everyone else in the game, so let's see how they do today. Creed, are you ready for today's test? We have a bit of a surprise for you today with Lord Marshal Dreir joining your faction.
Dreir? Good man. Doesn't flinch, doesn't blink, doesn't breathe louder than necessary. I trust him to watch my flank. You know you're in for a rough campaign when the sanest man on the battlefield rides a horse into artillery fire. Little horsey. You haven't known true fear until a Krieg warhorse locks eyes with you. That's not an animal. That's a mobile war crime.
I love his little horsey, indeed. Dreir's melee attack does 3,219 damage, and he takes 4,024 damage from Creed. That damage puts him in 28th position for melee attacks, and that's pretty reasonable for someone sitting on a horse. He is actually very close to Castellan Creed, and so can't be ignored there at all. His defense is pretty rubbish though in truth, coming in around 78th position, and I guess it's reasonable because he's going to be able to ignore crits that other champions can't, and heal himself up if he lives. So just make sure you're smashing him in one turn. Looking at his Mythic Missions from his Mythic Journey, we need to defeat 2 overwatching enemies with Marshal Dreir in one battle, heal or repair 2,500 health in one turn, summon 80 units, and then summon 8 units with Marshal Dreir in one battle, and finally deal 100,000 damage with Marshal Dreir. That first one's quite tricky, because if you're gonna beat 2 overwatching enemies, then that means you need to be able to charge twice in a battle, and that probably means using Onshi to re-trigger his active ability, and then maneuvering him into a place where he can get characters back into Overwatch. I guess the other way is that you get characters to flee with Overwatch, but I'm not sure how you're going to manage to do that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to do that one. For the second one, you're going to need his passive ability at level 48, which is a significant amount of badges. Then finally, for his fourth one, where you need to summon 8 units, then again that needs to be working in conjunction with Onshi. I think once you get past that first one though, you'll know exactly what to do there. And let's talk about his skills. His passive is Tough to Kill, and is in the healing category of skills. At the beginning of his turn, Dreir regenerates a ton of health, much more than the living metal faction trait of the Necrons at higher levels, and then he reduces all crit chance and crit damage by a really good chunk, which really does mean that he's going to be a tough steed to take down, and you're going to need to focus fire on him. Should this be prioritized as a skill over others for new players? Only if you want to level Dreir specifically, because it doesn't help others in battle even though it's a healing skill. His active is Leading the Charge, and this is in the spawning category of skills. And this active is a bit crazy, because if Dreir hasn't moved, he gains Infiltrate until the end of the turn, and then he charges an enemy that has a free adjacent hex within 4 hexes, dealing a bunch of power damage to it. But the really amazing part of this is that he then spawns a bunch of Death Riders in free adjacent hexes, and these horses have an extra pierce ratio in the turn they spawn in, and can instantly attack anything that's next to them. They do physical damage with a 1% pierce ratio in subsequent rounds, which isn't a lot of damage, but if they charge into a new enemy, they deal an additional chunk of blast damage. So if you're fighting on a large battlefield, they'll definitely be doing a bunch of damage, but on smaller battlefields, they won't be quite as effective. Should this be prioritized as a skill over others for new players? For sure. Spawning characters are the most powerful characters behind healers for early game players. So overall, with his traits and skills, I really think this is going to be a character that we see popping up in different teams because he is so much fun. There is something a lot more menacing with his spawns steaming in than some of the other spawning characters in the game. And you're almost guaranteed to spawn in a lot of them every time. It really does feel like it might be time for us to invest heavily in Forge Fiend active just to deal with the Gene Stealers and Astra Militarum teams. It definitely feels like there's been a power creep of spawns recently, so that new barrage that hits Arena after 8 rounds might well be needed more and more as well. Outside of that, he has a very powerful self-heal, which is 3 times the amount of Toth and the Necrons at level 50. So he's definitely going to be a staple in any legendary event battles that he can fit into, and will join the group of annoying characters we have to fight against that we have to grind through time and time again, and it might just catch us out a little bit. If we look into the modes that he can fit into, with legendary events, like I just said, he has a self-heal, and with that resilient trait and unstoppable trait, he's going to be great into any battles where he fits into. However, he doesn't have the most amount of traits, and he has an average hit though, so we'll see shortly how many he fits into. For guild raids, I don't really see him taking over the bigger teams yet. Spawns are too inconsistent, and not buffed enough to be a meta team by themselves, although that would be pretty insane if we get a really good spawn buffing character in future. For Guild Wars, he's going to be a pain in the butt, someone that self-heals with lots of spawns and charges around the battlefield. It's great, it's another annoying character to chase down. And for Tournament Arena, I really think we're going to see him pop up here and there, not as the highest damaging character, but as a shock troop, hitting from the back lines once the enemy's in place. Imagine a team of Celestine, Dreir, Thaddeus Noble, Yarrick, and Creed. Ugh, that just sounds horrible to face. So who does he work well with generally? Well, outside of the ones I just mentioned, of course we're going to need to look first at their own faction, and I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy this character. And so we might be seeing a bit more of an Astra Militarum revival. They have definitely been outside of the best factions, even though they are a wonderful beginner faction, bringing a lovely mix of range, psyker, and spawning into the game. And of course, they have one of my favourite characters, Castellan Creed, in there. But Cutscoden was always a bit of a letdown though, and I can see Dreir straight up replacing him in this lineup, which will cause an insane number of spawns to be flooding the battlefield. One thing to note, his riders don't have battle fatigue, so they won't be getting the extra buff from Yarrick's passive, but it's still an annoying amount of characters on the field blocking you up. And if Snowprint ever fix the Malleus rocket launcher and make the forward spotter ability have a cooldown of 1 rather than 2, then I think you're going to have a really solid faction in truth. Having Relentless means he works well with Isabella, although I can't see him standing still long enough for her to passively heal him. So I would just be sticking him into my long-range shock troop team with Blood Angels and replace Dante as the leader of a fast-moving, incredibly damaging team. And overall, I think a lot of people are going to fall in love with this character. He isn't the hardest hitting, he isn't the best in class, in anything really, but like Castellan Creed and Yarrick, they have a hell of a lot of charisma and bring a ton of fun into the game. So don't listen too much to those meta team boys, and just remember and play what you enjoy. Now let's see where he fits into with legendary events. Starting with the Pattermine event, which leaves us at the end of the month, and I'm not even sure if we're going to have time to open him before it does leave us, probably not, but until it officially goes, I'll add him in anyway. And so, in the Pattermine event in the Alpha track, he appears in the melee and max 4 hits battles. In the Beta track, it's no Imperials, so he doesn't get to play, and in the Gamma track, he appears in the no Overwatch, no Final Vengeance, and Power battles, which gives him an overall score of 260 points. In the Dante event, in the Alpha track, he appears in the Power damage battle. In the Beta track, he appears in the max 3 hits battle, and in the Gamma track, it's no Imperials, so he doesn't get to play. And so he ends up with a poor score of 110 points, which is under the average score for this event. Moving to the Trajan event, in the Alpha track, he could play, but he doesn't fit into any of the battles. In the Beta track, it's no Imperials, so he doesn't get to play, and in the Gamma track, he appears in the Resilient, no bolter damage, and minimum 3 hits battles. And that gives him a respectable score of 215, which is just above the average score for this event. And finally, moving to the Lucius event, in the Alpha track, he appears in the no bolter damage battle. In the Beta track, he appears in the unstoppable battle. And in the Gamma track, there's no Imperials, and so he doesn't get to play. And so he finishes off the Lucius event with 155 points, which is just below the average score for this event. And so he finishes down in 58th place overall, and that isn't massively impressive, but as part of the unstoppable team in the Lucius Beta track with self-healing, and that also goes for the Trajan event as well, where he can do the same thing in the Resilient battle. And so because there's no other healers in those teams, they could really make a difference between finishing one more stage, and that could really be important as we try and push for Lucius or Trajan's mythic levels from the legendary events. That's actually someone that I'm going to consider leveling up. I did wonder how I was going to manage to push those as high as what we need it to be, and so I think we might have found the answer. So what do you think of Lord Marshal Dreir? Are you going to be picking up this little boy and his wooden horse? Or are you going to be leaving him in the dust with Cutscoden? Either way, you can check them up right now in the latest version of the Google Planner Sheets linked below.